Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our AGM 2021. I'm Simon Acton, the current chairperson of the organisation, and I have most of the other committee members here on the call with me today. Hopefully, you know most of them. Obviously, we're a virtual-only event again this year with the ongoing restrictions. Hopefully, next year we can get back to at least having a physical element to this meeting. Let's hope we can do that. Yes, first thing to mention, hopefully you've all noticed our new logo. We put that out on the social platforms and so on and the website this morning. So yeah, let us know what you think about the new logo. We just went through a bit of a rebranding exercise and we're keen to get some feedback on that. Looking forward to the meeting today. We've some procedural things to go through, of course, as usual, including the voting for the committee. Following year, but we've also got two exciting presenters. We've Andrew Johnson from MG Ireland and we've Tom Spencer from Irish EVs. So hopefully that helps break things up a little bit and gives us something interesting to think about. As I said, we'll have voting at various stages of the meeting, and there are two different ways we need to handle this. For situations where we just need to get a first and a second, we'll ask people to use the raise the hand feature to provide a first or a second for a particular thing, such as approving the minutes from the last year's meeting. And then when we get to the elections, we have a SurveyMonkey form that we've sent out to all of the paid members. So if you're a paid member, you should have received that. And yeah, when we get to the appropriate moment, if you can use that to process your vote for the committee for the next year and a couple of other elements like the constitutional changes that we'll also go through. I'll just run through the agenda so you've an idea of what you've let yourself into this afternoon. First element will be, of course, to run through the minutes from last year, from the AGM that we had back in June 2020. Then we'll go into my chairman's report. Then we have our presentation from Andrew from MG Ireland, followed by the treasurer's report, a membership update from our membership secretary, Kevin Dowling. We have some motions from the previous AGM that we need to go through. And we'll have an opportunity to discuss the constitutional changes that we'd like to process as part of this meeting. And Bart will talk through those. We've then an open Q&A session. We've had a few questions submitted in advance, but as I said, if you've questions before we get to that, then please drop them in the chat or into the Google form. We'll then have the committee elections, and as part of that, we've 4 new candidates in the election this year, so you'll have an opportunity to hear from each of those briefly, so we can see who we want to vote for the next year. And we'll have a short break so we can process the election results. In the second half, we'll have the presentation from Tom Spencer from Irish EVs, followed by the election results, and then we'll go through any motions, any other business, and then hopefully we'll close out by 4 p.m. I'll start off by passing over to our secretary, Thomas, who's going to go through the minutes from the last AGM. Thank you, Thomas.
Okay, so the minutes of the Ievoa AGM for the 6th of June 2020. The chairperson opened the meeting. Minutes from the 2019 AGM. The minutes of the 2019 Ievoa AGM were read by the secretary and accepted. Chairperson's report. The chairperson provided a statement on electric vehicle adoption in 2019 to date, progress towards 1 million electric vehicles on Irish roads by 2030, and the state of the charging infrastructure. An exclusive update was provided by ESB e-cars detailing the location of the first high-capacity 150 kilowatt fast charging hub in Munster, County Kildare, and 7 further locations to feature 1 150 kilowatt and 1 50 kilowatt fast charger. Those are in Kilcullen, Galway Plaza, Portlaoise, Ballinalack, Carrick-on-Shannon, Lahey, and Kells. Finally, a number of locations where 22 kilowatt charging units are being or were recently replaced by 44 kilowatt fast chargers was provided. Those were in Dublinport, Kells, Cavan, Drogheda, Sligo, Tullamore, Kilkenny City, Galway City, Clifton, Kenmare, Athlone, Waterford City, and Dublin City. The chairperson then provided a review of the association's activities. The past year saw consultations with ESB eCars, ESB Networks, Smart Dublin and Element Energy, increased website content, Facebook group members increasing to 4,300, fundraising for CMRF Crumlin in memory of Alice Bang, chairperson featured on discussion panel at the Electric Vehicle Summit 2019, a number of media appearances and interviews, and migration of association's membership database. Chair envisions over the course of the next year, the association will continue to engage with ESB eCars, ESB Networks, Smart Dublin and Element Energy, enhance its lobbying efforts, improve association's full membership benefits, refresh association branding, increase association content on all platforms, engage with media, and increase frequency of committee meetings. Treasurer's report. The Treasurer presented the annual report and accounts were approved. Membership report. The membership administrators provided an update on the number and composition of registered members, with 1,392 members currently, 66 of which were paid members. It was stated that the membership database has been migrated to a new platform, which will ease management of membership data. Plans will be devised to improve membership benefits and enhance the frequency and availability of content. Question and answer session. Several questions were submitted to the committee for answer. Appointment of a National Electric Vehicle Coordinator, designated parking or lack thereof, and charge point reliability and availability. The availability of right-hand drive vehicles post-Brexit, and the state of the charging infrastructure in Northern Ireland. Election of committee. Several members chose not to seek election or re-election and were thanked for their contributions, while several others sought election to the committee for the first time. New candidates were allotted a short time in which to present themselves. Full paid members were asked to open the link they were provided with and to submit their election votes. A short break ensued, during which members engaged in their own discussions while votes were checked and tallied. The following positions were elected by members. Chairperson Simon Acton, Public Relations Guillaume Seguin, Treasurer Michael Sherlock, Secretary Thomas McGuire, Information Technology Paul Kelly, Membership Administrator Kevin Dowling, and Officers without portfolio Bart Connelly, John Bart Spang, Suzanne Mead, Richard Taylor, and Peter Bracken. It was noted that with 11 committee members elected, there was currently no room for co-optees. Tesla Owners Ireland. Tesla Owners Ireland founder and president John Casey made a presentation on their group detailing its background, what to do, vehicle support for members, merchandise, and other matters. Motions. It was proposed that the association lobby for planning applications with car parking include the capability to be upgraded to accommodate charging facilities. Motion was accepted. Photo Rally Awards. Awards were presented virtually to participants of the 2019 Photographic Rally, an unusual photo. Awards will be posted to award-winning entrants. Gold Award winners Paddy Carroll, Helen Carroll, Roger Lamb, Alex Neston, Nadia Neston. Silver Award winners Frank Barr, Conor McHale. Unusual Photo Award winner Guillaume Seguin. Any other business? Dirk Riley of the Effect.net sought member feedback on the whiteboards which had been provided to paid members. One association member will be upgrading their 24 kilowatt hour Leaf with a 40 kilowatt battery and will provide updates to the group. AGM concluded at 4:30.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I guess what we just need a first and a second to approve the minutes as an accurate reflection on proceedings from last year.
Just one point, as at the AOB, and it'll be dealt with no doubt in the Treasurer's report, there was a thing raised about expenses for whiteboards and posting them out, which was carryover from last year.
Okay, Thomas, if you can just note that in the minutes, please. Okay, if anyone can use the if you're in agreement with the minutes are an accurate reflection of last year, then please use the raise hand feature and we'll move along. Okay, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the chairman's report. So that's me, just to give a quick summary of the year. I've written out a report and that will be available afterwards as well for anyone that wants to consume that at their leisure. But what I'll do is I'll read out the report. Thank you all for taking the time to attend our AGM today. I'd just like to give a quick flavour of the general state of play for EV adoption in Ireland, the work we've completed as an association during the past year and to support this cause, and what we plan to do to drive things further forward over the coming year. In what's clearly been a very challenging year for the automotive industry, it's been great to see EVs buck the trend and continue to sell strongly and increase market share in what has been a difficult period for dealers and consumers alike. In 2020, new electric cars, fully electric cars, BEVs, sales increased by a modest 17%, but under the circumstances, in comparison with other sectors, this was a good progression, with almost 4,500 new vehicles sold in total, with the Tesla Model 3 being the #1 seller with over 700 units sold. For plug-in hybrids or PHEVs, new sales increased by an impressive 87%, with almost 2,500 new vehicles sold in total, with the Kia Niro PHEV being the #1 seller with almost 500 units. But this only tells half of the story for PHEVs, with almost 4,000 used imports also added to the Irish fleet. Clearly, consumers are still seeing PHEVs as an appealing option, considering the reassurance these vehicles offer and especially good value, at least until recently, on the used imports. Whether used imports can hold up in a post-Brexit world remains to be seen, with the inevitable impact of VAT and import duty on the majority of BEV and PHEV models being an increase in used prices on these vehicles here in Ireland. Used imports have been and continue to be an important part of growing the Irish EV fleet in an affordable way, since for most people a new EV just isn't financially viable, even considering the incentives available. One thing is certain, we will not meet the government's stated target of almost 1 million EVs on Irish roads by 2030 by selling new cars alone. For these reasons, we are progressing conversations with various stakeholders to see if a way can be found to make used EVs more affordable, especially in the face of the aforementioned Brexit impacts. So can 2021 be the breakout year for BEV sales in Ireland? Well, the year's got off to a very promising start, with Q1 sales figures already at around 75% of the total sales figures for 2020. This is undoubtedly being driven to some extent by much greater model variety and increased confidence due to greater driving range in many of these models. As you can see on the chart, if we continue on this same course for the remainder of 2021, our adoption curve is starting to look a lot like what we have long predicted, based on the trends we've seen in other countries, such as Norway and the UK. In the past year, we've once again seen some good improvements in charging infrastructure, with ESB cars continuing work on their 5-year programme and EasyGo also expanding their network considerably. Ionity added a couple of new sites, Tesla superchargers remained unchanged for the time being, and we've recently been approached by Fastned, who are looking at entering the Irish market also. It's clear that many retailers, shopping centres and workplaces have also added chargers. This all helps with the public perception of EV charger availability. What has been less impressive is the seeming lack of progress by local authorities, with the SEAI grants available for on-street charging mostly unused. We know from the work we've done with Smart Dublin that plans for the 4 Dublin council areas are progressing, but this is taking longer than anticipated, and we still have not had sight of the strategy paper created in consultation with Element Energy. We continue to chase this, as it will likely be a very good blueprint for other local authorities. So to ESB cars. From their perspective, in the past year, we've seen the introduction of the first 150 kilowatt high power chargers at a number of locations. Paid for charging on the standard AC network was introduced last autumn also. Most users will probably agree that availability and reliability of the network has improved, but it has been an unusual year, with many people travelling a lot less than they would normally, so the jury is still out until we get to a post-COVID situation. Conor O'Brien of ESB cars kindly provided us with the update that you can see on the slide here. The most significant news being that shortly, hopefully in June or July, we will see the first ESB cars charging hub open at Mayfield on the M7. This will be a 4-unit site capable of charging 8 cars simultaneously. Up-to-date information on all of these activities can be found at the link shown at the bottom of the slide. In conversation with e-cars of late, it's becoming clear that identifying suitable sites for charging hubs is a significant challenge, with many potential sites on key routes occupied by the big forecourt retailers, who are so far largely unwilling to commit to their own plans for charging infrastructure, but also seemingly unkeen to commit to contracts of the duration ESB e-cars would require to develop hubs on their sites. This is something that we will watch closely over the coming year, as it seems that this may require action at a higher level, possibly from the Department of Transport or the Transport Infrastructure Authority Ireland. As for EasyGo, it's so good to see an independent Irish business going from strength to strength. Chris Kelly of EasyGo kindly provided us with an update, which you can see here on the slide. They already have over 10,000 registered customers, with 28 DC chargers and 900 AC chargers available on the network, and they're set to expand their DC network further considerably over the next 2 years, with an additional 200 rapid chargers across Ireland and Northern Ireland. It's also worth remembering that as an EasyGo customer with their fob or app, you can also access chargers from other network operators. Moving on to the cars themselves, the availability and choice of new EV models continues to accelerate. This last week alone, there seems to be an announcement almost every day. There were some very significant arrivals on Irish shores in this last year. The VW Group has made a significant impact in a very short period, with both the VW ID3 and ID4 arriving since our last AGM. The ID3 already seems like a common sight on Irish roads. The Audi e-tron range has also expanded with several variants to the original e-tron. Plus, we now have the e-tron GT and the e-tron Q4 announced only the other day, arriving shortly. Skoda also have the Enyaq arriving, and Seat have models also waiting in the wings. So VW, with their MEB platform, have the platform which has allowed them to roll out a significant range of models across their brands very quickly, with many more to come. It's starting to feel like they are the biggest challenger to Tesla's crown, but they still have a long way to go on the technology front. Tesla really needs to get the Model 3 here as soon as possible, or they might miss the opportunity of market share to competitors such as the aforementioned VW Group models, the Nissan Ariya and Mustang Mach-E. I think what I noticed most of all when putting this particular slide together was that the majority of these cars are SUVs. It's clear that the manufacturers are playing to what they believe consumers want, but for the most part, these are not efficient body shapes for cars, and they're also not cheap cars. What we really need, above all else, if we're going to make a significant impact on transport emissions quickly enough to address the climate emergency, is more affordable EVs for the masses. Cars such as the Dacia Spring, for example. According to Dacia, the Spring, which has a 230 kilometer WLTP range, and in France at least had a starting price of just shy of €17,000. It remains to be seen if Dacia will sell this car on Irish shores, but fingers crossed they do. So what have we achieved as an association in the past year? Just to give a quick summary. We moved to a monthly cadence of online committee meetings, which has allowed us to work more cohesively as a group and to progress our objectives more effectively. We've continued to consult with ESB cars and other charging infrastructure providers. We've worked with ESB networks, attending and speaking at a number of their innovation events and workshops. We attended a Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment working group regarding the skills needs related to the electrification of transport. We established quarterly meetings with both SEAI and the Department of Transport. We made a submission to the CRU relating to Price Review 5, and that's to do with energy pricing for the next 5 years. We worked with Smart Dublin regarding on-street charging infrastructure for the 4 Dublin Council areas. We've redeveloped our website, and we've set about a rebranding exercise with our new logo, as we've shown today. We maintained and moderated our Facebook group, which now has over 5,000 members. And a big thanks to our moderators, Bart, Guillaume, Thomas, Killian, and Inga, who do sterling work in keeping this content relevant, independent, and friendly. We continue providing content on our other social platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So if you don't already, please follow us on these platforms as well. Myself and a few other members once again attended the annual EV Summit, which is normally held in Croke Park. This year, of course, it was a virtual event. Last year, it was a virtual event. And once again, I was invited to take part in a panel discussion alongside other industry leaders. This is an invaluable exposure for our organisation. With no realistic opportunity to host any physical events, we instead hosted 2 virtual events for members. The first in November regarding used EVs, and the second in February regarding charging and charging infrastructure, both of which were largely well attended and well received. We've continued to contribute to various TV, radio, online and print interviews and articles for RTE and many others. We test drove and reviewed a variety of EVs. We've commenced collaborations with other EV groups, including the EV Alliance of the UK and Ireland and the Global EV Alliance. And finally, as mentioned already, we've reviewed and reworked our constitution to facilitate, in particular, corporate memberships and improve governance. More on this later. So what are we planning to do in the next year? Of course, we'll continue working with ESB eCars and the other charging infrastructure providers to ensure Ireland gets the charging infrastructure it needs now and for 2030 and beyond. We were recently approached to consult on the FASTER project, which is a charging infrastructure project in the Northern Ireland border area. We'll continue to participate and consult with ESB networks, in particular with their Dingle project, and share the learnings about EV adoption in rural Ireland, vehicle to grid, home storage and smart chargers. I'll continue to work lobbying other stakeholders, including SEII, Department of Transport, and the Department of Climate and Environment, Climate and Communication. We'll continue working with Smart Dublin regarding the Dublin Council's project, and we'll lobby for improved incentives, especially for affordable and used EVs. And we'll develop better incentives for our current members. We plan to relaunch the Ievoa brand with our new logo and so on, just as soon as we can have some physical events. So what we're planning is an event in each of the 4 provinces where we can all have a get together, but obviously that will need to wait until the COVID related restrictions are lifted. We'll continue and hopefully increase the frequency of publications on our website and social media platforms. And if you would like to contribute to that, then please do let us know, because we're always looking for new contributors. And we will continue to engage with the media and be proactive as well as reactive on that front. What has been especially encouraging in this past year is that organisations and stakeholders have started to come to us to engage. It doesn't feel like we're pushing on a closed door anymore. We have consultative status and we are the recognised voice of EV owners in Ireland, so we'll continue to maintain and strengthen that position. Finally, I'd just like to offer my thanks to all our committee members for their hard work over the past year, most of whom wish to continue on for another year, with the exception of our friend Bart, who has decided to step down from the committee this year, but it continues to be involved as a moderator. Just to remind everyone that all our committee members, moderators, give their time freely to help further the cause of EV adoption in Ireland, and we should all be very grateful for that. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the meeting today. I'll hand over now to Andrew Johnson from MG Ireland.
Thanks, Simon. Firstly, I'd just like to say thanks to Simon and everybody at Irish EV Owners Association for the opportunity to speak today. It's a great honour, so thank you for that. Okay, just to start off, my name is Andrew Johnson and I'm the National Sales Manager for MG Motor Ireland, which is a new car brand that has entered into the Irish market. A lot of you guys would have known it from in the UK, where they sell both EVs and ICE vehicles. The Irish market is only an EV market, and we won't be bringing in any ICE vehicles from MG, so you'd be glad to hear. We're part of the Frank Keane Holdings Group, which employs over 300 people here in Ireland. And part of the group, we're separated into 2 elements, I suppose. We have a distribution company and we have a retail side. So if I just start with the retail side, most of them I'm sure will know kind of Frank Keane BMW, which is on the Nace Road in Blackrock. We've Frank Keane Volkswagen in both Liffey Valley and Dean's Grange. And we've recently appointed MG as a retail store as well. On the distribution side, we have Fuso Trucks, we have Mitsubishi, and we now have acquired MG. So to just go through a brief background, the company would have started as the BMW distributor in Ireland back in 1967. In 1984, it took on the Mitsubishi, which evolved then into Fuso Trucks franchise as well, where we've continued to distribute those products throughout Ireland. Last year, then we were appointed MG distributors. We've great experience of EVs within the group, both from a retail and from the distribution side. On the distribution side, on the Fuso, we've just launched the first electric 7.5 ton truck, which is now gone on to Irish trucks. So you'll see on Post driving some of those around. Fingal County Council have taken some as well. So it's really starting to kind of gather pace. There's also a new grant there as well, which is going to really push sales for us. So in terms of Mitsubishi, obviously there was the Outlander as well, which is probably the most successful PHEV in the world. But obviously then Mitsubishi decided then to freeze all new models coming into Europe. So I suppose that's I suppose why we jumped with MG to bring in a new brand. If we're going to be if models are going to be frozen with Mitsubishi, we have to obviously sell something. So the opportunity arose. We went after it and we were successful in getting it. So when we looked at the figures, and Simon has gone through many of these figures already, it was a no-brainer for us to take on a brand with so much EV offerings in it. So you can see we predict for EVs to double. Last year was in around 4,000 units. We predict EVs this year to double to 8,000 units. So massive growth. And again, there's just going to be a continued growth for forever really now. So we can't kind of see that the days of an ICE vehicle will end and it will all move to EVs. Like at the moment, I had a look there this morning and there was 3,035 EVs registered, not including light commercials registered this year compared to 4,013 last year. So it's really ramping up now. And PHEVs, as you said as well, Simon, there's huge growth in the PHEV market this year. That's going to more than double this year. But we do think it will slow down now that the SEI grant will halve from July onwards. We do see that starting to slow down the second half of the year, and we can even predict that the SEI grant will go fully on PHEVs. But it's the real growth is going to be in full EVs. So we launched MG to the public in December of last year, and we appointed a dealer network of kind of really big names around the country. So we've 6 sites. We've Linders and Frank Keane, as I mentioned before, in Dublin. We've Colm Hanley in Tipperary, Johnson and Perrott in Cork, and then Shields Galway and Shields Limerick. They're big dealers with a good reputation, and that was very important to us. With a new brand coming into the market, it was important that we appointed big name dealers to sell our product. So we launched with the ZS EV, and it has really good success for us to date. It's a little bit hard, obviously, when we launched in December. We obviously went into a lockdown shortly afterwards, so our showrooms haven't been fully open, but yet we've still been able to sell remotely. So we've had good success. Part of I suppose, our pillars, and when we're selling MG vehicles, there's 3 pillars, and that is style, spec, and then price. So the vehicles are priced really, really well, but first and foremost, they look really well, and there's a huge amount of spec in them as well. In the MG ZS, there's an MG Pilot feature as well, which has tons and tons of safety features, which we feel is a very, very competitive offering in what's become a very populated segment of the market. Another important factor as well is our warranty. We offer a 7-year, 150,000 kilometer warranty, which is a really, really good warranty. And again, because it's a new brand, it was very important to us to give customers peace of mind. So again, they're just some of the features of the ZS. And again, we feel that you shouldn't need to compromise on spec when the price point is so good. So we feel it's a very good package between spec, style, and price. So now we have MG5. I'll be honest, MG5 is a little bit of an unknown factor for us. And Simon mentioned in his presentation that most vehicles are all SUVs, whereas this is a sports wagon. So it's really going against the grain of what's there in the market. So it's a bit of an unknown quantity for us, but we haven't really kind of officially launched it. The vehicles are actually due to land into the country this week. We have had pre-sold units, but what's really helping here now is the new taxi grant. We've seen a huge amount of inquiries coming through now from taxi drivers looking to purchase the vehicle because of the new grants there. So it's really starting now to take off for us. But it's not just for taxi drivers either. We have a lot of people inquiring about the vehicle as well, say with dogs or bikes, because of the space in it. It's huge capacity, and then the range of the vehicle as well, with a 345 kilometer range, which is 52.5 kilowatt battery. It's a really good range of vehicle, and the price of the vehicle is really competitive. Starting at 27, just over 27,500 euros. It's excellent value for money. So again, it's just spec again, and again, even though the price is at 27,500 euros, there's no compromise in spec either. There's lots and lots of features in the vehicle, and lots of cool stuff. So yeah, definitely, we think it's going to do really well. So our third vehicle is a PHEV. It's the MG HS. It comes with a 16.6 kilowatt battery, coupled with a 1.5 turbo petrol engine, sorry, I should say. It's a D segment size, again, has tons of spec. This vehicle has a very premium feel about it, and has been really well received in dealerships. It's one of those vehicles, I suppose, that it's only going to have a very short shelf life. I think PHEVs, as we discussed in earlier, it's not going to be, it's more of a transitional vehicle before kind of more EVs then come into the market again. But again, starting price from 33,150, and obviously we've had great experience with our Outlander. The price is really keen when you compare it to something like the Outlander. And again, tons and tons of spec again, but I just emphasize it's a real premium feel, this car, which would be slightly different than, say, to the ZS. A lot of you guys would have seen the Marvel R, and a lot of people got really excited about the Marvel R. Unfortunately, bad news is it won't be coming to Irish shores. There's a different product plan in MG for left-hand drive and right-hand drive markets. So the Marvel R is not a vehicle that's destined to come here. Now that could change in the future, but right now there's no plans to bring in the Marvel R. Looks really nice, and we would love to have it, but it's just not going to be produced in right-hand drive. So it's not for us. There is a design centre for the European market. It's in London, so they are designing cars here for the European market. So you would have seen the E-Motion and the Cyberstar. So they're all being designed out of the London office. Again, they're only concept cars. We've no official time frame to come. It's the parent company SIAC, who, as you'll know, are a Chinese company. There is plans to expand the EV range into Europe and in right-hand drive, but at the moment we've no launch of the E-Motion or the Cyberstar. I can say that we will be offering a new B segment car, and that will come probably towards the end of the year or start of next year, and it will compete with something maybe like the Renault Zoe. So we will be providing details on that later in the year. And then after that, then there is a product lineup to come to Ireland as well, but it will be all EVs. So exciting times for the brand. We're really looking forward to it. And yeah, we really feel that the EV market is now starting to explode, and we feel that MG will hopefully get a good bit of the action of it. So we have our usual social media channels, so keep in touch with us. We want to stay engaged with the market, so any questions at all, feel free to contact us, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. And that's everything from my side. Thank you very much, and any questions, I'll be here for the Q&As.
Many thanks, Andrew. Now let's move on to the Treasurer's report. Now, unfortunately, our Treasurer, Michael Sherlock, couldn't be available today for personal reasons, but Kevin is going to ably deputise in his absence. Kevin, I'll hand over to you.
We'll see how ably I'm able to do this. So you've got me for the next 7 slides. I apologise in advance. So the Treasurer's report, it's pretty simple to read this. The top part here is basically the day after the AGM last year. So that's why it's the 3rd of the 6th. We typically do the AGM earlier, like this year, but last year, obviously, with COVID hitting, we kind of delayed the AGM and all the process around that. So at the closing of the AGM last year, we had 2,932 and 81 cents. And then from there through to today, the expenses are largely bucketed into 3 categories. So the first category being trophies and awards. And the second category being the new website development and the logo design, which you can all see here on the slide and the rest of the slides in the deck. And if you haven't seen the new website, please go check it out. It's pretty cool. And then finally, bank charges. So in total, there was 1,209.54 cents worth of expenses. And then that leads into income, which was 1,905 on the button. And you can see the PTSB balance, that's like the bank account where we have cash stored, is 1,080.65, and then the PayPal account balance, which is basically the initial point at which most people pay us for their membership fees, is 1,852.16 cents, which gives us a closing balance today of 2,932.81 cents. So that's largely the report. I think, Michael, we were talking about this the other day. The only comment to make on all of this is it looks like we've got a bunch of money just kind of sitting around. Largely, that's due to COVID. Our expenses are reasonably low anyway, but because we can't run events, we're not for today, we're not renting a hotel space or any of that kind of stuff. So ideally, we actually spend a bunch of that next year on a bunch of fun stuff for everyone. That is the Treasurer's report. If you have questions, stick them into the Q&A. We can address them later on and ping me directly. I'm happy to answer where I can. But hopefully Michael is happy with what I just said. Simon, do you want to click through to the next piece?
Yeah, before we move on, we should ask for a vote to approve the...
Yeah, can I raised a point earlier on, and with the exception of that, I'd like to propose the minutes. Or sorry, not the minutes, the Treasurer's report.
Okay, we've got a second. Thank you, Eamon. Great stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, cool. Kevin, the membership update. Thank you.
We've got 4 slides here, and I'll go through this reasonably sequentially. It'll make sense. So I took over the role last year from Bart, who you'll hear from next section. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that went on the last year. But kind of summarizing most of it, the first one is we grew the membership by 20%. So we're going up towards 2,000 members. For those who are unaware, the members are the people who are actually putting their hands up, filling in a form and telling us they want to be a member. That is not the same as someone who's just liked the page on Facebook, for example. So obviously we try and do our best to convert those folks over, but these are people who are very specifically involved and engaged with the membership of the association. We also grew our paid members by over 100%, which is pretty cool. So we had, it's about 10% of the total membership that actually is paid. We've made a big effort in the last year to make sure we're doing more communication to members to encourage them to convert, but also to renew and do all the kind of good stuff around that. So like I said, we've got a really good kind of cadence there. Ideally, we'll do more, and I'll talk about that in a second. The big job I had last year was we moved everything from wherever it was last year into a CRM, which just gives us a better system to manage and maintain everything. Like you would have noticed, we sent a bunch of emails out this year. In fact, we sent 9. And they've got really, really high engagement. If anyone has ever done email marketing or newsletter stuff before, 60% open rate is a really, really strong number. And having 25% click-through rate means that people are actually engaged enough to click through and fill in forms, look at content, do whatever we're kind of doing, and kind of share what we're trying to share with you. The yield of all of that with the CRM is that we've got better data on everyone, and we've got a better way of segmenting it up and making sure we're able to localize. Like I said before, COVID kind of gets in the way with events and things, but actually we've got a really good way of figuring out who people are, where they are, what they're driving, etc., etc. The example here is this map. There's 3 comments to make in the map. One, for some reason, the map software wanted to delegate all the different sub-regions in Dublin. Dublin is by far the biggest region, as you probably imagine. The second one is, I don't have data for whether you're in North or South Tipperary. There are people in Tipperary. And then the final comment is either they don't want to admit they're from there, or we just don't have anyone in Longford, Cavan or Monaghan. But the best of luck to them. So maybe we need to do a bit of work to get more folks from there. Or as I say, they just don't want to admit it. The other side of this is the little kind of pie chart at the bottom. I know it's a little blurry on this, but this is kind of largely what people are driving. Now, we haven't had a great facility for people to update the car that they're driving. So if you upgraded and bought a new car, let us know. But I will we'll introduce some new stuff this year that helps with people automatically update that stuff. But it's largely dominated by the Leaf. Probably not a surprise. And if you think about the historic nature of the membership here, like there's a bunch of people who have Leaves for years and maybe have upgraded, but they haven't told us. But I would say even if it's super clean information, it's probably dominated by the Leaf. The 2 that are obviously growing quite aggressively would be the Tesla and the VW ID3. We're seeing a lot of ID3s come in now. But there's a really strong range of different cars, despite the Leaf being the most dominant one. Outside of that, it's actually pretty balanced. A couple of Taycan owners, all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting. No real reason for that. I just wanted to kind of share that we have basically a whole range of different type of car owners here, and we're in everywhere except for Monaghan, Cavan and Longford. God love them. So this is the plans for 2021. So last year, a large part of the plan was, as you can see, growing the membership, growing the number of people who are paying and doing more comms. I think we've done that and we'll keep doing that. I want to continue to grow our membership by about 20%, if not more. We did it last year. I think we can do it again. What's interesting is now in the membership end of things and just the association growth generally is we're at a point where EVs they're kind of moving from like a niche thing with a very, very kind of, I suppose, maven type of owner. But we're not at that top peak where it's like really innovative or special to own an EV. It's now becoming the norm. As you heard from the previous slides with the MG rollout, there's a lot of new cars coming from a lot of different manufacturers. It's Ireland, and it's going to go to, we're getting to a point now where it's not, you're not an early adopter if you've an EV. It's going to become pretty normal. So we want to make sure that we're representing those members as we go forward. So that's one side of it. Second side of it is we want to offer more incentives for folks who are becoming a member. So although we want to represent all of your thoughts, particularly from what Simon said before with ESB and all the other vendors that are coming into Ireland, we also want to make sure that there's a quid pro quo. You're actually getting something else from being a member other than just being represented. And that, you know, comes into events, information, et cetera, community things, which we'll drive much more of over the next year. Those incentives this year, I'm hoping we get back to events, even if it's meeting people in the car park. I think the last one we ever went to, everyone was doing the elbow shuffle. Hopefully we can get away from that. But we also want to create discounts for members. So if you're a member in the community, there's actually a bunch of vendors who've already stepped forward and said, like, we're happy to offer incentives and discounts and things like that for our members. So we'll drive that pretty aggressively this year as well, as best we can. So look for that. We'll send out more information as we get it, but there's going to be some good stuff for members in the next year. Finally, on this piece for 2021 is we want to change the pricing. So I'll talk about that in a second, but we want to accommodate the fact that we're going to grow. It's getting more complex to run the organization, but also there's more members who have more demands and we want to do more stuff for them. So we're actually going to change the pricing of the membership in the association. Second thing to note, and Bart will go through this in a few minutes, is all of these things will go through the constitution. So we have an annex that will go out, that's spun out specifically for membership, which is very easy to read. It's just a couple of bullet points, and that will kind of outline all that. Like I said, Bart will talk about this in a few minutes, but on the next slide here, I can go through it in a bit of detail specific to members. This is the proposal. So the first one is pretty simple. Base price this year, and I think probably every year previously, was €10. We want to change that to €20. That's the proposal. So we're doubling it, but it's not exactly an enormous price. Interestingly, this year I've had folks who've donated €20. So they've donated 100% extra on top because they felt like it was worth it. And we've had a bunch of feedback to kind of say, like, the price is a bit low comparative to other associations. But also we just want to build up a bit of extra revenue so that we can do more stuff. Second one then is we're getting to that point again, like I said, where EVs it's not Maven customers only. It's just kind of an average household purchase. When you're thinking about a new car, I think everyone I know now at the stage is saying their next car will be an EV. So there's probably going to be a point at which there's more than one EV driver in a household who wants to attend events, wants to come to the AGM, all that kind of stuff. So instead of charging everyone in the house €20, we'll charge €30 for the household if there are multiple people in there. So we're just going to be mindful of the fact that there's probably multiple owners of EVs in the same air code. So in that scenario, we'll have that. Of course, if you're more than welcome to pay a load of base members if you wanted to, but that €30 is there for you. Probably bigger for this year. It's a big change for us. Again, outlined specifically in the Constitution, is the introduction of corporate membership. So this is kind of the same as the standard association members idea, where we're representing those folks at a different level. The other one for corporate membership, which is very common in other organizations, would be they want to network with each other. They want to talk about all the problems they're having, all the things that's going on in their world. So we want to help facilitate that. So for any company that's 50 or less employees, we will charge €500 per annum. And then for anyone who's 51 or more employees, we will charge 1,000. We'll kind of tweak the dial on this, figure out what way this will look over the next year or two, but that's, as an initial starting point, I think it's going to be pretty compelling for a bunch of companies to come in. Like I said, we've already had a bunch of folks asking for this kind of thing. So this year we can actually kind of roll it out. And like I said, you can add more on the donations, etc., if you wanted to, but that won't change what kind of status you have as a member. We're kind of keeping it reasonably flat across the board for normal members. This is why we want to change. So there's a couple of things. I mentioned before that we're growing. We're pretty ambitious as a group, as a committee, and we want to do more stuff. We want to have more resources. So with the just the general growth of the organization, and also the growth of the number of companies or bodies around us, there's a lot that we need to do to kind of help represent everyone's thoughts, opinions, and input in a kind of mindful way. So with all of that known, we just kind of want to make sure that we're ahead of that. There's not a huge amount of expenses like you saw, but things like travel, things like events, all those things will cost money as we grow. And things like events, particularly if we start to do events in like hotels and things again, they'll cost more money than they did in the past because we've got a much bigger pool of people who will want to attend. So knowing that, we want to make sure that we're able to actually afford all of that stuff. Second part of that as well, like I mentioned, corporate companies want to network with each other. Right now, I'm sure they're doing it and it's a bit ad hoc, but it would be nice to kind of put it under the banner of the association. And we're more than happy to facilitate that as long as we can. And then the final piece, and this is probably not an immediate thing, but it will be a good place to kind of aim for, would be to get better organized. Right now, it's a bunch of committee members who donate a bunch of time and effort to run all of the different things that the association does, but it will be really good to have someone who can herd the cats. So someone who's a part-time member of staff effectively paid by the association. Like I said, we're not there yet. We won't have the money for that immediately, but it will be a really good goal for us to get to a point where we can actually afford to do that. We'll be able to run more events and just do more stuff for you, any new members, and corporate members as well, as we kind of grow that out. So a bunch of ambitious goals are there. And like I said, they're all going to be in the Constitution. There's an annex, like I said, very easy to read out. So I'll pass over to Bart.
Thank you, Kevin.
Is it the motions for? Oh, it is, yeah. Yeah, this rose out of, Thomas has already mentioned it actually in the chat, that it's a matter arising out of last year's minutes that somebody said, can somebody develop, it was Roger Lamb, yeah, can county councils, if you're planning in the future, that you should have EV chargers or availability, and that should be a law, and we should be lobbying for that. But in looking into this issue, we found out that there already is this is a ministerial question from about 3 weeks ago. There already is a European law which is in which you have to provide that in the future. That isn't, but in the meantime, anyway, we had contacted county councils, but then we found out this. It's the EU Energy Performance and Building Directive. But other people, such as Eamon Stack there and other people on the committee, we have been looking into publicising this law, and also looking at retrofitting areas and how we can assist in getting councils to do that, or to bring in policies on that. So that's fairly much answers the question of the motion from the last AGM. Unless there's any question on that, or you can ask them at the end if you want. There's a link there to it's actually written and a verbal reply from the minister.
I was going to say, is Roger Lamb here today? I'm not actually sure if he is.
Don't think so, but
no, I haven't seen him.
He's here.
Oh yes, right, yeah. Does that answer your?
Okay. I was just going to see if Roger wanted to come in, but
yeah, fine. I'm happy to. It's just in looking into it, we were preempted that there is a kind of a European law there anyway, but that it doesn't preclude us from doing this anyway and staying on it. And actually, we have we've also put in a submission on procurement. There's a law coming in August, September, the end of August, I think, which is European law again, and it's forcing it. So due to people like Roger not raising things like that, we've got onto lobbying in these areas as well. Sorry, there was something Roger said in the chat there. Oh no, it hasn't been implemented yet, but that's from 2 weeks ago, and the minister is saying that it will be by the summer, as far as I remember.
Yeah, this
is currently being transposed into Ireland law. So they actually have a couple of principal officers working on drafting that's what they're really saying there.
Okay. I suppose I just wanted to get an opportunity to make sure Roger is satisfied that we addressed the motion, and if he's not able to come on and talk, then we'll move along. Okay.
Okay, I'll go on. I'll bring it up on the Q&A then if not, and you, Roger, you know. Okay, the next bit was to do with Constitution.
Hang on a sec there. Roger's saying he can talk. Gonna unmute
right,
yourself,
fine.
Roger,
Yeah.
and respond.
Hello, Roger.
Okay. No, it's good to go and get that feedback. But I was just wondering, the link is on the web thing. Is it possible to put the link in the chat so people can actually look at it directly?
Someone put it in the chat.
Paste it into the chat, yeah.
I'll try and
It's
paste
in
it
there.
into the chat.
Thomas put it in there.
And I had to see it when it's actually implemented going forward.
Yeah, that's
You
only part
understand
of the whole answer. I mean, the answer is about a page and a half. That's just a paragraph from it. And it's actually an answer to
That's okay.
6 or 7 questions.
Okay, thanks. Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. We move on, Bart.
Yeah, the constitutional amendments, as you were saying there, they kind of fall out of, this originally started with corporate memberships, the idea of corporate memberships. But when we looked at the constitution, we saw there was kind of little bits, and people have looked at it, you'll see them there in red. You had associate members, full members. So it was to try and iron up all these pieces. The second thing was what the excellent presentation just given on membership. The problem is there's only maybe 40 or 50 of us here now, and maybe hundreds of members might want a slight change and say, well, why isn't it 1,500 or why isn't it 30 instead of 20? So we need to leave some leeway open that during the year we could, if we wanted to, change the membership, but it would have to go back to the AGM to approve that, but it would still stay in effect during that year. So that's why we put in all these annexes at the bottom. The disciplinary procedures is mainly if there's an issue and we have to be responsible to new corporate members coming in, but we don't want internal spots. So if it gets into a huge, and I don't see this happening, but it's just being practical, and it's just being professional, that they can take that into a legal arena or to a professional mediator if they want, and then we have a kind of an internal disciplinary position for dealing with things inside. And all these things can be changed by the committee throughout the year, but any changes will be subject to the next AGM saying, yeah, we approve of that, or go back to what you had before. So I think that deals with most of the stuff. The one other thing I would just say is, but it's apropos of nothing, is the scale from the presentations we've had so far, going by government targets of there's about 2 million cars in the country, and the target is about half of them to be EVs by 2030. So these graphs we're looking at of 8,000 units a year, we're talking of getting 80,000. So there's enough in the pie for all the EV providers. 80,000 a year for 10 years is what we're looking at if we want to try and get into that. So the scale of this is huge in terms of providing chargers, not just providing cars, you know, and that everybody has to work together on this. So anyway, that's the constitutional amendments. I don't know if there's any nitty-gritty things we need to go on it. It was mainly to put in all the things we can change during the year at the bottom, and then everything else would be set. There was one other problem was, it's not a problem, it was just that the president, like trustees in organisations, is regarded as a kind of an honorary figure that will go out and you know, be the image of the organisation. So we had to fit that in and then do a few amendments so that the chair would be able to organise meetings and address meetings, and how do you replace chairs if one isn't around. So that's literally I think that's all of the amendments covered, and people should have seen them all by now. They were all emailed out.
Yeah, I mean, I just to add to that, there are obviously a few sort of loose ends and clarifications that we made as we went along, as we saw there were things that maybe had just been the way we'd been operating, certainly in the time that I've been involved, and the constitution had never been amended to reflect that. So we were just picking up those loose ends. Nothing strange or
one other
unusual.
thing was COVID proof. We made ourselves COVID proof by allowing to do online things and stuff like that. If that
That's
happens
right.
again.
Yeah. So guess the only other thing to say about this is obviously we're in the voting that we will have later on around for the committee. There's also a vote to adopt the new version of the Constitution. We require a 2/3 majority to carry the motion to adopt the new Constitution. Hopefully people have seen it. There will be an opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A, which is coming up next.
And it isn't a whole new constitution; it's just ironing out bits to take in corporate members. And,
Okay, thank you, Bart. Right, Q&A 7. You've obviously have we got stuff coming in on the chat that you want to add into the back end of this while we take the first question, which was pre-submitted?
Yeah, if you go address that, I'll do the rest and I'll ask the questions after. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of questions here posed by Killian Darlington. Killian, are you with us, and do you want to speak to this quickly to summarise what you submitted there on the slide?
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. It's just something I noticed that regarding the grants. We know that there's been adjustment on the higher end of it, but people may or may not be aware that the maximum grant you can get for VRT relief is just over €3,000. It's not €5,000 anymore. So the grants have been eroded recently. We know that more expensive cars have had it taken off. And I'm not necessarily against that at all, but I would like to see the Irish EV Owners Association maybe push the government and the SEI to rebalance it, instead of just taking the corners or the edge cases off the grant, but to target them even more at cheaper electric cars. Was the gist of that, the first part of my point, that I would like the IEVOA to address that, to make it more public as well, maybe use our position to move that a little bit to help increase those grants, because they do make a difference with EV uptake, especially targeted at cheaper cars. So that's the first point I want to make. The second was about EV charge points in park and rides. If the IEVOA could address this when they're working with local councils and with the Department of Transport, that one of the great comebacks that people have against electric cars is that they don't solve congestion. And it's true, they don't solve congestion in cities. So the answer to that is to allow people with electric cars who don't live in cities to access public transport. And the way to do that is to have chargers at park and rides. And the big one is the Red Cow roundabout in Dublin. And there's no electric charging in that one at all. There's a number of ones as well that don't have it. It's just a point that I think would help with the transition to electric cars, having a large bank of even 7 kilowatt chargers, 22 kilowatt chargers at the park and rides would be a big incentive for people to travel in electric cars where it's more appropriate, but then transfer onto city transport to ease the congestion in cities as well, and reduce it in the suburbs as well. So that was the 2 points I wanted to make, and it was more as an issue that I wanted the IEVOA new committee to be aware of, that I as a member was concerned about. Appreciate the time, Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Killian. So I don't know if anyone else from the committee wants to jump in and speak to this. I can say words. I mean,
I can just about the first point. If you want.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just about the first point. Actually, we had the conversation with the SII recently. It was like last week or 2 weeks ago, and we actually brought the idea of having more subsidies for lower end vehicles. So, for example, a model like the German model, which is saying, okay, if you give €2,000 discount as the dealer or as the manufacturer, then there's a matching €2,000 more. So that would lower, and the example was that we brought up was €25,000. So, for example, that would apply under €25,000 cars, or maybe over 35 without the incentive, something like this. So it's the exact opposite as what's happening today on the higher end. So we gave them that suggestion.
Yeah, I think the other thing to add as well is obviously the incentives are broken into 2 parts. There's the SEAI side, which obviously is not the side that you're talking about here, Killian. It's the VRT side. So I think we need to probably have a conversation with, probably starting with the Department of Transport about this, and then maybe that, where that leads, I don't know, it could be to the Department of Finance. But yeah, you're absolutely right that it is misleading at the moment, and it's obviously a factor of the VRT system changing last year, and it hasn't been sufficiently clarified. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's something we're happy to take on. It's a question really of whether we should formalize that into a motion, or whether it's something you're happy that we will take on in our various conversations. The second point about the park and rides, yeah, totally agree. Again, we're having various discussions with Department of Transport and SEAI around where they should be locating, slow charge type infrastructure, and park and rides is certainly one of those things. And we did actually raise that in one of the conversations that we had certainly with DOT already. One of the frustrations of the last year, certainly since the change of government, is that a lot of the people that were involved have moved on, and new people have come on board, and we've spent a lot of time trying to find the right people again to get those conversations going. And we're doing a bit of education of some of the people in those positions as we're going along as well, which is, it is what it is. It's a bit frustrating from our point of view, of course, but yeah, we are aware of it, and we're trying to progress both of those points. So it's really up to you as to whether you want to see those things proposed as motions and we take them on as formal tasks for the next year, or that we take them as more informal. But I don't doubt there'll be things that we'll be talking about anyway.
2 brief points, if I can.
Go for it, Bart.
On the first point about, see, the problem is you can introduce false competition. If you put in a 10 grand grant, the manufacturers or the suppliers can just increase the price by 10,000. So I'm quite happy to bow to the consensus of what the membership or the committee thinks, but I would think that on the SEA side, I know home chargers may be only 1,000, but you could have 100% grant for home chargers. Or you could have free solar panels or some sort of system that does cost 5,000 or 6,000 at home, and that would have the same amount in terms of capital amount in terms of money, but it wouldn't be affecting the market price and things like that. On the other side, yeah, I agree that both the public service needs some awareness, and you think that, and they have some great people in there, but then they're not always in the right place. But the other side of it is, I've been looking at, say, for instance, UCD, I think, have about 2,000 or 3,000 car park spaces and 6 chargers, some of which are taken up by a car charging firm anyway. So DCU have taken over St. Patrick's and All Hallows College. They now have the largest education department in the country, and they have their Glasnevin campus. They have 8 chargers. So the scale of this, we need to have like hundreds, or as you say, half of the Lewis car park. That's the sort of targets we need to be looking at. And this is where, again, the people like Eamon and that have been pushing to get county councils to get their own workers' car parks. You know, all these numbers need to go up and up. Just having 2 isn't enough. We need to be talking about 2 dozen or 50 or 200.
Yeah, and I think we made that point in our discussion with Department of Transport. You know, they've a budget to put in what they're calling destination charging in different locations, but yeah, like whether there's more benefit in scattering a few here and there versus doing one big project in a park and ride, for example, is something that they will consult on and make a decision on. But yeah, certainly it's a discussion we're having, and we're trying to make those points for sure.
And this is where the charging infrastructure and the public procurement, the 2 different areas, come together.
Are you happy enough? We move on.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk?
Yeah, I'm happy that they're kept as informal rather than hamstringing you with a formal motion. But I just wanted to, I emailed you a bit more to voice my issues, and I knew you'd listen, and that just to keep them in the forefront, really. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Killian. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else from the committee wants to jump in and speak to this. I can say words. I mean,
I can just the first point.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just about the first point. Actually, we had the conversation with the SII recently. It was like last week or 2 weeks ago, and we actually brought the idea of having more subsidies for lower end vehicles. So, for example, a model like the German model, which is saying, okay, if you give €2,000 discount as the dealer or as the manufacturer, then there's a matching €2,000 more. So that would lower, and the example was that we brought up was €25,000. So for example, that would apply under €25,000 cars, or maybe over 35 without the incentive, something like this. So it's the exact opposite as what's happening today on the higher end. So we gave them that suggestion.
Yeah, I think the other thing to add as well is obviously the incentives are broken into two parts. There's the SEAI side, which obviously is not the side that you're talking about here, Killian. It's the VRT side. So I think we need to probably have a conversation with, probably starting with the Department of Transport about this, and then maybe that, where that leads, I don't know, it could be to the Department of Finance. But yeah, you're absolutely right that it is misleading at the moment, and it's obviously a factor of the VRT system changing last year, and it hasn't been sufficiently clarified. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's something we're happy to take on. It's a question really of whether we should formalize that into a motion, or whether it's something you're happy that we will take on in our various conversations. The second point about the park and rides, yeah, totally agree. Again, we're having various discussions with Department of Transport and SEAI around where they should be locating, slow charge type infrastructure, and park and rides is certainly one of those things. And we did actually raise that in one of the conversations that we had certainly with DOT already. One of the frustrations of the last year, certainly since the change of government, is that a lot of the people that were involved have moved on, and new people have come on board, and we've spent a lot of time trying to find the right people again to get those conversations going. And we're doing a bit of education of some of the people in those positions as we're going along as well, which is, it is what it is. It's a bit frustrating from our point of view, of course, but yeah, we are aware of it, and we're trying to progress both of those points. So it's really up to you as to whether you want to see those things proposed as motions and we take them on as formal tasks for the next year, or that we take them as more informal. But I don't doubt there'll be things that we'll be talking about anyway.
2 brief points, if I can.
Go for it, Bart.
On the first point about, see, the problem is you can introduce false competition. If you put in a 10 grand grant, the manufacturers or the suppliers can just increase the price by 10,000. So I'm quite happy to bow to the consensus of what the membership or the committee thinks, but I would think that on the SEA side, I know home chargers may be only 1,000, but you could have 100% grant for home chargers. Or you could have free solar panels or some sort of system that does cost 5,000 or 6,000 at home, and that would have the same amount in terms of capital amount in terms of money, but it wouldn't be affecting the market price and things like that. On the other side, yeah, I agree that both the public service needs some awareness, and you think that, and they have some great people in there, but then they're not always in the right place. But the other side of it is, I've been looking at, say, for instance, UCD, I think, have about 2,000 or 3,000 car park spaces and 6 chargers, some of which are taken up by a car charging firm anyway. So DCU have taken over St. Patrick's and All Hallows College. They now have the largest education department in the country, and they have their Glasnevin campus. They've 8 chargers. So the scale of this, we need to have like hundreds, or as you say, half of the Lewis car park. That's the sort of targets we need to be looking at. And this is where, again, the people like Eamon and that have been pushing to get county councils to get their own workers' car parks. You know, all these numbers need to go up and up. Just having 2 isn't enough. We need to be talking about 2 dozen or 50 or 200.
Yeah, and I think we made that point in our discussion with Department of Transport. You know, they've a budget to put in what they're calling destination charging in different locations, but yeah, like whether there's more benefit in scattering a few here and there versus doing one big project in a park and ride, for example, is something that they will consult on and make a decision on. But yeah, certainly it's a discussion we're having, and we're trying to make those points for sure.
And this is where the charging infrastructure and the public procurement, the two different areas, come together.
Are you happy enough? We move on.
Yeah.
Or do you want to talk?
Yeah, I'm happy that they're kept as informal rather than hamstringing you with a formal motion. But I just wanted to, I emailed you a bit more to voice my issues, and I knew you'd listen, and that just to keep them in the forefront, really. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Killian. Kevin, what else have we got?
Yep. 2 or 3 things here. So one, I'll actually address myself. Renewal is a messy program. There is a feature in PayPal to automate this. Yeah, we know we're going to work on it. It's something we have that we want to do. One of the big challenges last year was moving all of the member data into a CRM without a lot of metadata and stuff. So now we've got a bit of a better system in place. We can start to remind people about renewals a bit better. We've started to get a little bit fancy. So actually some people are getting emails that have completely different content, for example, to others. So when your email says, please renew, it's because we know you haven't renewed, and someone else gets a different piece of text, for example. So there's little things like that coming. We'll be able to do more on the website as well with this kind of stuff. So we'll get much more fancy, much more sophisticated as we go through. And to the point of this comment as well, like we'll leverage more of the features of PayPal and have a look at PayPal more broadly as well going forward. So it is on the agenda for the next few months, and hopefully sooner than later. So it's one. And if you have any questions, email membership you'll hit me directly. I'm happy to have a chat with anyone. There was a question about voting for the amendments on the Constitution, etc. All of that is done in the link that you have. If you're a paid up member and for some reason you can get the email, again, ping me directly, even in just the Zoom chat. I'll send you over the voting link. It's just a SurveyMonkey link if you haven't seen it. So one here came in, I think this is broadly a comment rather than a question, but if anyone wants to address it from the committee, that would be helpful, I think. But it was to suggest to work toward avoiding getting into an EV versus petrol battle scenario on social media. Leave those folks to themselves. With more EV users coming on board each month, and be clear to them that EVs are the future. Don't get sucked into pointless fights trying to justify against ICE ignorance. I'll pause for a second. Does anyone want to comment on that or address it?
I'll just say something to that, and it's a question that I've had from quite a few people, and it's normally around the whole Toyota advertising their self-charging hybrids dynamic, and as to why we don't officially engage in that. And I think just to kind of reiterate, there's a few reasons for that. One, we don't have an endless amount of time and resources, and I think taking on someone like Toyota is very difficult and challenging. Take a lot of time and resources to do that. Realistically, where are we going to get and what are we going to get out of it? Plus, we'd rather focus our efforts on positive campaigning around EVs and plug-in hybrids, and encouraging people that way rather than coming across as very negative and objectionable. There are formal channels for complaining about these things. Obviously, there's the I forget the exact name of the advertising watchdog, but I mean, you can make submissions. I know a number of people have, and they haven't really done anything about it, which is a frustration, of course. But yeah, as a association and as the current committee stands, we have deliberately not set out to get into a fight with people like Toyota about their advertising.
Cool. There was a hand raised there. I don't know if that was deliberate or not.
Sorry,
I know it went back there. Yeah, Kathy, do you want to come in?
Sorry, yeah, that was me. I suppose just on social media, like I used to drive a plug-in hybrid. I always feel that there's, you know, a lot of people are very aggressive towards plug-in hybrids, and I think, you know, they suit some people, and I think, you know, every bit helps, and every electric mile or kilometre should be encouraged rather than people being bashed for it. I've changed my car to a Leaf now, and my husband has the plug-in hybrid, but I do think that, you know, people should be encouraging of people to drive their electric miles. And for some people, they do all short journeys. And like in the plug-in hybrid, I've had the warning light for you need to put fuel in this car after 3 months. So I've driven for 3 months on electric. So I just think it's not right to be bashing. And I think if somebody comes on and they're thinking of it and they see, BEV drivers bashing BEV drivers, I don't think that's useful. So that's just my tuppence worth on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The official position of the association has been that we support BEVs and FEVs, and that's the position at the moment, because as you say, BEVs, well, traditionally BEVs haven't suited everyone. Obviously that's shifting a bit, but yeah, if there are specific issues around behavior on social media, then the moderators should be addressing that. So, and if there's something specific you want to flag up, then please flag it to the moderator.
I think it has improved, but it does happen from time to time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's helpful, particularly if somebody is thinking about it and they see people, beating each other up on social media. I don't think it's helpful, but I do think it's improved a bit. So thanks for that.
Can I pop in on behalf of the moderators? You got a good point, Kathy. We do try and keep it to a minimum, the amount of, I suppose, ice bashing or hybrid bashing that goes on. It does potentially happen. If anyone ever sees a comment or anything that's wrong on the Facebook page, you can actually report an individual comment to the moderators and we'll deal with it usually relatively quickly. But obviously some will slip through.
Can I say something in relation to that, the FEVs actually that I recently came across?
Yeah.
I talked with an Outlander driver who was at a fast charger and wondering why they weren't using, this was up in Sandyford, why they weren't using the normal 22 kilowatt, and only then to discover that in fact the DC is much quicker than their onboard AC charger. So there was a reason they were doing it, and I think there's a lot of misinformation that's gone around. I was certainly under the impression that actually they couldn't pull any more by being on the fast charger, but they can. On the DC they can pull faster, so there's a very good reason for them to be on it. I think that should be got out.
It's also not just the fact that it's faster or anything like that. There's a lot of the assumptions is because you have a petrol engine, therefore you have an alternative, and therefore you shouldn't be using any of the charging infrastructure. But the fact is, the charging infrastructure is a pay-by-use instrument, and if any particular FEV needs to charge to prevent any emissions, I welcome it. Obviously, normal etiquette would apply, as in, don't be blocking it, don't be things. But to say that just because you have a petrol backup, that you can't use the actual infrastructure is just wrong. And I would always actively try and discourage that particular kind of thought.
I mean, there's a difference between, an Outlander charging on DC at 17 kilowatts and somebody in like a 225XE charging at 3 kilowatts on a fast AC. I think these two are different use cases, and I think that's recognized.
Yeah, I think as well as it's education again. People who are owning particular vehicles. Some people know their vehicles very well, and that was a good example there, Paul, of maybe something that some of us weren't maybe aware of. So yeah, but yeah, there are an awful lot of people who aren't given the information they need about their vehicles and will unfortunately plug it in somewhere where it might not be the best thing to do. But yeah, as Jan-Bart says, chargers are there for everyone. Anyone that's got a plug, they're within their rights to use them.
If I may, through the chair.
Yeah.
Just to answer Keane's question, yeah, that's a question of scant resources. But if we had a wide enough charging infrastructure, the evolution of technology would eventually rule out the slower chargers, but there would be enough chargers there anyway to service everyone. So it's a question of planning again, is what I'm saying, even though the problem exists at the moment.
Okay, Kevin, will we take one more question? I'm aware we're running quite long already, so we take one more question.
Yeah, we have a hand raised from Brian McCann. Brian, do you want to unmute yourself and you have the floor?
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for accommodating the question. What I'm going to suggest is something that has been brought up by a number of people, including Professor Brian Caulfield in Trinity. A lot of people in urban areas and academics feel that the best way to try and reduce our carbon emissions in the future is actually to encourage walking and cycling and public transport usage, and that, you know, EVs, or the target for EVs is extremely high and unlikely to be reached. But one of the issues outside of the major urban areas like Dublin and Cork possibly is that a majority of regional and rural dwellers and people living in smaller towns, more remote urban areas, are still going to need to use their cars. And as Killian was mentioned earlier in his question, they may end up using the public transport system as well, but they have to drive to it and use park and ride. And there's also an issue that they're the users that actually create the biggest carbon emissions in the country. You know, if we're going to do this, we need the diesel and petrol drivers, particularly diesel drivers in the rural areas and the regions, convert to EV. That's where we get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of actually putting in incentives. And for that reason, there's been a suggestion that the government should go down the route of actually incentivizing rural and regional dwellers and people in urban areas and more remote that have longer journeys to actually have greater incentives to buy a car, and that the SEA grant would be higher for those in the regions where they have the longest journeys. They're creating the greatest carbon emissions, and you get the greatest incentive then, you know, because converting to EV, even if your journey is still the same, you're going to reduce the amount of carbon emissions and pollution as well when you enter the urban area that you might work in. And I just wonder what the committee think about taking that approach to try and encourage on getting, you know, because it is actually the other way around, that a lot of our EV drivers are actually in urban areas, and there's nothing wrong to obviously driving an EV in an urban area. It's obviously good. It's just as air pollution. People still need to drive, but there are very few alternatives in public transport and other alternatives in rural areas, which the majority of people in Ireland live in, if you consider everywhere outside of Dublin being a smaller urban area. And I consider, you know, I think it would be an interesting thing to look at this and see, is there that they maybe maintain the SEI grants and incentives in Dublin and other areas, but they actually increase them to try and, you know, provide that sort of assurance to customers that the value of the car is actually fairly good. Because I think the problem, I know Bart mentioned that if you put up the grants, then I think that's a very cynical approach. I may happen, you will end up getting higher cost vehicles, but I think that hasn't happened in other countries. If you look at Norway, you know, the grants are huge there. You know, there's been a massive rollout on vehicles, and particularly those that have longer journeys as well, and particularly those that have larger miles. They can see the incentive there. I think the cost of the vehicle is the problem in many cases, and if we want people to in the numbers that were suggested, 80,000 a year, we're going to have to bring down the cost. So that's just an issue. I thought I'd throw it out there and see what people think.
Okay. Can I reply to that through the chair?
Absolutely, go for it, Bart.
Yeah, again, you just mentioned the point that so you've preempted my reply there. Part of it is artificially interfering in the market, but I would rather, my view would be, deal with this on the supply stage rather than demand stage. So rather than giving a grant for a car, leave all the cars be at the same price, but have the person in Ballyhonus have electricity at a cheaper rate. So all those chargers down there get it cheaper. Now, if somebody wants to drive all the way from Dublin down there to charge up their car, that's their own business. But it's actually solving the problem by using the problem itself, that you're saying that if people in remote areas are the ones that you want to get to move over to EVs, even give them free electricity there and get them to move over to EVs. So that the charging regime, but do it on the supply of electricity rather than the demand for cars.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. Just to come back on that, I think that is probably worth doing as well, but I think it has to be in a range of things. And there's no doubt that no matter, you can do all the sums you like and show people through spreadsheets that, you know, over a 5-year period, an electric car is cheaper to run than a diesel car, you know, even though the cost of, people still believe that. They actually look at the cost of purchasing it and say that, you know, an equivalent family EV is 10 grand more than a diesel version, and they just see that as even though the obviously servicing costs and fuel costs are much less. So I mean, I think I understand what the point you're making, but I still think it's something that's worth exploring, because of the fact that, you know, the grant, if the grant is there, a lot of the car dealers they want to sell electric vehicles, but they obviously, they're worried about their what's going to happen down the line with their profits, and particularly for maintenance. But at the end of the day, there is a transformation happening, as you can see, and even that presentation from the MG company, that, you know, as we get closer to 2030, more people are going to buy electric vehicles. So anything that can be done to make them more affordable, and, you know, is obviously good, and obviously maybe battery technology will help that as well down the line. But really, I think if you're going to have incentives, and that has worked in other countries, Norway is a good example. I think we need to have proper incentives where there is a really big reduction, and I think it's really the rural drivers that have the biggest. They're creating the biggest problem with carbon emissions. But I agree, there could be a range of different possibilities that we should be looking at.
I think
Or even just VRT completely is another one you could do as well. You know, just as they've done in Norway, just remove VRT, move VAT and, you know, VRT from electric vehicles for those in rural areas or smaller regional towns.
Yeah, I think the conversation around VAT is a difficult one, and it's something we've raised endlessly over the years and didn't really get anywhere with that conversation because it's potentially massive money for the revenue. I think what we're likely to see, we've been seeing quite a bit of carrot for EVs. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more stick for diesel and petrol. And whilst that's unpopular, it will have the effect of driving people or make them consider more about their running costs. And you're right, a lot of people won't sit down with a spreadsheet and see that over 3 to 5 years it will work out cheaper, or they just won't believe that. But I think if you start pushing up running costs significantly, then people will open their eyes to that a lot more. I mean, like I said, I think it's what you're suggesting is something I would have to think about before replying properly. I think certainly it's a conversation we can have with the SEI to see what their thinking is around this stuff. The other thing I would mention is one of the things that is going on to highlight the benefits of EVs to rural communities is the Dingle project, which I don't know if you're aware of, the ESB Dingle project. And there's going to be a lot of good learnings come out of that will be able to be socialized with rural communities. There's a lot of money available in grants for community projects for solar and wind turbines and things like that. So you know, if you can get communities working together and they're going to run EVs, then you can imagine a world where their running costs might be absolutely nothing because they've got grants together to put in infrastructure to generate free electricity to run their vehicles. But yeah, all of this takes education. It's difficult. I totally get what you're saying, and the rural community transition is really important. And yeah, we need to do more on that.
Thanks.
Was Eamon trying to get in?
Yeah, just a brief point. Brian, what you're saying is very important, and I think we're just, Bart and myself and others have been working on the local government policy. So I do think we need to work on that, maybe for next year, to have a document whereby we look at the nuances on these issues. We get informed by academics, like you say, and we come up with a structured approach. So I do think this is we've groundwork to do. And currently, Aidan Maconville mentioned the local government action plans. They're all out of date. They all suggest walking and cycling as a solution. We know that's not real in rural Ireland in most parts. So I think as those new local government action plans are developed, we need to engage with them to ensure that there's a sensible strategy towards real people needing to transition to EVs.
Thanks for the question, Brian. I'm sure there are a lot more questions out there, more than we've time to take. If anybody wants to pose a question to me or to another member of the committee, then please reach out. You can email me, chair@irishevowners.ie, or you can also email pr@irishevowners.ie. So any questions that we've not got to take today, please submit and we can get back to you in due course. We are running very long, so let's move on to the election procedure. I'm going to hand over to Thomas to talk us through this, and we will hear from the 4 new candidates going for election today as well. Thank you, Thomas.
All right, it's that time of the year again, the election or re-election of committee members. Okay, we have a number of returning committee members seeking re-election this year. So we'll just go through them and their respective positions that they're seeking. We have Simon Acton for chairperson, Kevin Dowling for public relations, Michael Sherlock for treasurer, Thomas McGuire for secretary, Paul Kelly for IT, and for committee members without portfolio, we have Gillan Sagan, Bart Connelly, Peter Bracken, and Eamon Stack. And now I'll give the 4 individuals that were seeking election for the first time an opportunity to speak. So first up, we have Derek Riley. So Derek, if you want to join in there.
Thanks, Thomas. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll keep it short and sweet. It says exactly what it says in the tin there, originally from Mayo, but now living in South County Dublin. Not easy when you're a big JA Mayo fan to be living in this county. I've been a member of the Irish EV Owners Association since 2019, and also have been a sponsor with the website, theeffect.net, where we used to, and we still do, give out new member packs for those who sign up and want to receive something in the post. I've been reviewing EVs, and I have the YouTube channel that you should be aware of called EV Review Ireland. I'm also a contributor on News Talk and Q102 here in Dublin, and I'm the founder of the Dublin EV Owners Club. I'm a regular contributor to the Facebook forums, obviously with my own content, but other content that I think is relevant to the EV community. So hopefully you know who I am. I'm passionate about electric vehicles, and hopefully I get your vote today. Thanks very much.
Next we have Philip Connor.
Afternoon, everybody. You may or may not know me. I'm an energy industry insider, head of energy services for a national utility. So I live a life of renewable energy, sustainability, consultancy, and advice. Electric vehicles, I've been involved with for the last 3 or 4 years prior to my current role. But since 2018, I worked in some European projects to develop solutions for electric vehicle charging rollout to the consumer market. But day to day, I run a team that is involved across multi-technical pieces. I'm constantly networking with SAI, deal with CRU, deal with ESB networks. So as an energy industry insider, I think it's a much benefit to be involved with Ievoa on the committee side.
Next up, we have Connor O'Boyle.
Hi all, I'm Connor. I'm co-founder of an automotive technology company called Sweep. We're a classifieds company in Ireland. We're very much cutting edge technology in terms of what we do, and obviously being so deep in the automotive industry from a user perspective with over 100,000 registered users on the app, we see how much things are changing towards electric. I'm a PHEV owner myself, and people particularly in their 20s at the moment, we see, including their early 30s, are really uneducated about electric vehicles. We're planning to change that over the next couple of months, doing some partnerships. And from my point of view, very keen to help Ievoa to really develop and use some of my expertise from my financial and connections background to help aid the association.
And last up, we have Roland Kreiner.
Very good, very good. Hi everyone, my name is Roland Kreiner. I'm a Dutch living in Ireland for now over 20 years, and also an EV owner for the last 7 years, starting off with the first generation of Leafs, which I held until last year. In the lockdown, I actually got my lovely Mini Cooper delivered. And as I'm a passionate EVer, so we actually converted our whole household to 2 EVs. So we have the Zoe and we have the Mini Cooper. We also have solar panels and battery packs, so really looking at everything to improve the sustainability aspects. As you probably can see from a logo, it's not the official logo, of course, but there's the I work for SAP, not the landscape company for those that live in Dublin that think that. It is in the same business park, City West, but we are a software company, German software company. Have been working there now for over 17 years. So this was my lockdown celebration, as you can see for the picture. But what I've done since I started driving EVs, I've been lobbying at the company to get charge points installed. We have actually done over 3 years in a row. I've organized EV events. I know the options were not that many. I mean, we pretty much had Renault, Nissan, and BMW at the time. But it was really about trying to create awareness with the organization. And ever since, we've grown with the number of EV uptakes. And certainly now the complaint is more about, well, not at the moment, of course, because the office is closed, but the employees would complain about EV chargers always being blocked by EVs. So, which is, of course, a good problem to have. So, of course, what I'd like to contribute to the community is, of course, my years of experience with EVs, but also with the business side of trying to understand what it takes to get businesses onto EV platforms and getting charge points installed in their home, at the office locations, because I think it's a big driver as well. And as well, all around the education, what I do find a lot is that when people buy an EV, they're not well educated on what the EV actually can do in the sense of charge speeds and options that they have available to them. So that's where I think I would like to bring some value and some input for it as well. Next to that, I am married to an Irish and actually an official author ever since the last 2 weeks. So hence, I just thought I'd do a little bit of blob and put her book there in case you're interested into that. But thank you very much. I hope that you vote for me and like to be part of the community.
Okay, on to the election procedure then. You may have received an email over the past day with a link to SurveyMonkey, at which you can go register your votes on the, the election of committee members and for the changes to the Constitution. If you haven't received the link yet, you can just message us in the Zoom chat there and we'll check it out and get back to you.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, well, we'll take a 10-minute break there, and when we come back, we will have Tom Spencer from Irish EVs to make his presentation, and then we'll have the election results. So yeah, we've run very long the first half, but take a quick 10-minute comfort break now, and we will see you again in 10 minutes. Thanks a lot. Welcome back. Let's hand over to Tom Spencer from Irish EVs. Tom, on you go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be here and speak with all of you. So quick bit about myself. I've spent the best part of the last decade working with electric vehicles in one form or another. I've worked with a number of racing teams in FIA Formula E. I've worked with some EV manufacturers and some autonomous vehicle manufacturers as well. And then since moving to Ireland, I created the Irish EVs website. So what is Irish EVs? Ultimately, we're a consumer website. We're entirely independent. We don't have any advertisers. So our focus is very much on giving the best advice possible with no bias. We're really focused on trying to educate people and to show cars in the context of the climate crisis. So obviously we know around 20% of Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions come from the transport sector. So we're trying to put cars in that context, and we feel that particularly at the moment the media isn't representing that as well as it could do. And then another factor for us is confronting myths. So whether that's greenwashing or confronting a lack of education, which obviously has come up a lot today, and even just common misconceptions. I know there was a survey in 2019 in the UK that found around about 12% of people didn't think you could drive an electric car in the rain. So obviously there's a lot of work for us to do there, and we want to play our part in doing that. So obviously, as everyone has discussed today, Ireland has a really ambitious goal of 1 million EVs on the road by 2030. And as Simon's covered in his sort of overview of the last year, there's a lot of reason to be very positive. We've seen a lot of improvements in the sales of EVs. There's clearly a real hunger for them. And particularly in battery electric vehicles, to see a rise of around 16% year on year, despite the actual overall car sales in Ireland dropping by 25%. That's a huge year on year improvement, which is great. But the big question is, how do we go from around 30,000 vehicles to this 1 million? So moving on to the next slide, I think one of the things we've seen in the past has been that the Irish government has really prioritised scrappage schemes. And while that has worked well in the past in getting people from sort of outdated high emissions vehicles into newer, slightly lower emissions vehicles, it also creates a huge amount of waste. Scrappage schemes typically take cars that run absolutely fine, they're perfect for everyday runarounds, they're just high emissions, but ultimately they still have a role to play. And while we have seen there's been a lot of improvements as well made in the reuse of the materials from scrapped vehicles, it's really important to bear in mind that it's still an incredibly energy intensive process. You need to rip apart all of the components of the car. You need to then process them and melt them down, and this is hugely energy intensive and just creates more waste. And the stat that I hope will shock you as much as it did me, in a typical year, we tend to scrap around 160,000 cars in Ireland each year. So we're creating a vast amount of waste already, but we think there's a solution to that. So coming on to the next slide, there is a growing industry for EV conversions. So what do we mean by EV conversion? Simply taking a petrol, diesel or hybrid car and then converting it to run as a battery electric vehicle. I'm sure if you've seen any of these cars so far, they've probably been quite high-end, quite classic cars, you know, lots of lovely Ferraris and even Mini Coopers and things. But there is a real market for everyday runabout vehicles, and we think there's a huge amount of potential here. So we're seeing more and more organizations and companies offering lower end conversions. And we're also seeing more and more training courses for mechanics and enthusiasts to convert their cars as well. But it's not just cars, it's trucks, tractors, ambulances, boats even, anything that runs with an ICE engine can effectively become a battery electric vehicle. And we think that there are huge opportunities here in the next few years. So moving on to the next slide, how does EV conversion work? The good news is that it's actually relatively simple. It typically comes in two forms. One is standalone, that's taking your own particular vehicle and customizing it exactly as you want, and that tends to be a bit more expensive. But then there are also kits too, and kits can be made mass produced, they can also be open source, and that can really drive down the cost and make it accessible to more and more people. In terms of the actual process for conversion itself, it's pretty easy. It's taking all the parts that make an ICE an ICE, so the engine, the catalytic converters, the fuel tanks, removing those and replacing them with an inverter, motors and batteries. Even things like the gearboxes can remain in the vehicle. You can actually use these and make them functional. And one thing that we think is a particular sort of benefit at the moment is those parts that we're taking out of the vehicle can actually be sold off for spare parts. We know that there's a huge problem with catalytic converter crime in Ireland at the moment. So you can see the huge amount of demand there for the components that we're removing from the cars. So you can actually sell these off and cover part of the costs. So yeah, moving on to the next slide. We know there's a lot of confusion about registration, and this is something that a lot of people fear when it comes to EV conversion. But the really good news is that this is actually a pretty solid process. It's been done by a lot of people, and we know how it works now in Ireland. In fact, we recommend going to openinverter.org. There's a whole guide on how to process and register your converted EV there. Being very sort of giving a quick summary in such a short period of time, the process is to get an automotive engineer on board. Once you've done the conversion, they'll come and check that everything is safe, secure, as it should be, and meets all of the right specifications. And if it does, they'll give you a certification to say this vehicle is now an EV. So the second you get that, you can re-register it purely as an electric vehicle. And from that moment onwards as well, regardless of what it had before, it registers for the €120 road tax as well, which is great. And then also from then on, it's still treated just as an EV. So things like your NCT test, it would go in for that exactly as any new EV would. So there shouldn't be any confusion or any new processes or hoops to jump through. One thing that we would say is contact your insurance in advance. We know that the insurance industry has kind of dragged its feet on electric vehicles anyway. Now, there's no reason your insurance should go up for it being an EV, but we recommend just having a chat with them in advance. It's something that will save a bit of pain later on. And then on the next slide, the big question I'm sure everyone has, which is cost. How much does it cost? The really good news is obviously, if you are using a car already, you have the largest cost there anyway. you're not having to buy a new one in effect. So at the moment, it's a pretty simple conversion. Speaking to those who do it in Ireland today, we see that the costs range from about 2 to 5k, and that will give you about 80 to 100 kilometers range. But we expect in the next sort of 3 to 5 years that will really improve. So we think in about 2 to 3 years, perhaps we'll be looking at about 5k, and that will give you 240 kilometers to 320 kilometers, and that includes parts and labor. So in relatively short order, we think you'll be able to have an EV conversion that has around the standard range of a new EV on the road today. One of the big factors in that is the production of kits. So speaking to Kevin Sharp of New Electric, he thinks that with more and more kits becoming available, it should be possible to convert an EV in around half a day. So that's obviously going to be a huge reduction in cost there in terms of labour. The two factors that we say keep in mind the most are batteries and fast charging. These are the two biggest costs that you can have. Of course, a lot of people will want to look at hundreds and hundreds of kilometers range as they do with new EVs. We say just look at the one that you need now. And of course, we know that there's a huge new market for range extender batteries as well. And I think this is where there's huge potential to make your car modular. You can upgrade it as you go. So in the same way that you buy a new EV at the moment and the software changes over time and you get more range, we think that there's a huge opportunity to take what you have now and keep developing it over the years and reduce a massive amount of waste. I'm conscious that that is an incredibly quick fly through of a very complex subject. So I've just got one more slide for everyone, which is just some recommended reading, really. Some organizations and some resources that we think will be helpful. New Electric, they're doing some amazing work. They started in the Netherlands. They were operating in Ireland, and I think sadly due to the pandemic, they won't be any longer, which will be very sad, but we recommend going and reading them. Fikra Cook has done a great job of cataloging the conversion of his Audi and how he's converted that across. And he's done a lot in terms of how you register these vehicles as well. So we recommend going and checking him out on Twitter. Damien McGuire as well is doing amazing work with open source. So he's hacking Tesla and all sorts of bits like that, which is a brilliant thing to go and see. There's Kevin Sharp, who's of the aforementioned New Electric. He's a real expert in this field and has been driving EVs himself for over a decade. And then hopefully there's us as well, Irish EVs. We have 2 articles on this very topic. So we have one which is how electric car conversion works, which goes into what we've discussed today in a lot more detail. And then there's also incentivizing EV conversion, so how we can hopefully encourage the government to move away from scrappage schemes and get more people to see cars as resources that we can recycle and reuse. Anyway, there we are. I know we're sort of running behind today, so I hope that was a informative, helpful, quick run through.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think that's a really interesting topic, and it's, you know, another string to the bow of how we can get to the big numbers, hopefully by 2030. Yeah, I'll be talking to you some more about this. A few of you probably know I've got an old Mazda RX-8 sitting on my drive that I'm planning to convert, so that needs to become an EV. So we'll be having a conversation about that. Okay, moving on. So I'm hoping in the background the guys have been squirreling away and looking at the results. So Thomas McGuire, can I hand over to you?
Still awaiting the results to be finalised there at the moment.
I guess then while we're waiting on that, then maybe if there are any more questions from the participants, if anyone wants to throw in a quick question we can discuss while we're waiting.
Can I ask the people who gave presentations if we can send on the slide sets to our members?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I'll also share some links as well that I hope will be useful for people. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Tom, I think you mentioned to me that you maybe had some information that we could send out as follow-up. So yeah, if you let me have that, then we can circulate it or post it on the Facebook forum or whatever, both.
Will do, absolutely.
Okay, Kevin, do we have any more questions? We could quickly have one more question while we're waiting on the results.
Yeah, quickly is an abstract term here, but there was there was one that came in earlier on that we just didn't get to, which was an interesting comment around just the technical knowledge that people need when they go to buy an EV. So the person who wrote the comment was saying that they have a Renault Zoe and the charger only works on 22 kilowatt chargers. They have to figure out what to do, what chargers they can use, all that kind of stuff. And effectively, the comment was that the dealer themselves weren't that helpful. And it was a broad comment, but I think there's a discussion around this. We've even had it on the committee about how we actually address the fact that like there is a different learning curve. It's not just putting petrol into the back of a car. There's a bit more to it for some folks. It is getting easier with newer cars on the market, but I suppose how do we think about, or how do we address the fact that there is a technical challenge that can come up for folks, especially people who aren't that particularly technically minded when it comes to buying an EV? I see some hands up. So Simon, do you want to make a comment, or will I just pass it to the folks who are hand raising?
I'll make a quick comment. I mean, yeah, I obviously, I suppose we're obviously here to help with those things, but it's a question of people knowing that we exist before they buy a car so they can ask those questions. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. I suppose without getting into my conflict of interest area, there are independent EV dealers out there who know what they're selling, whereas your more run-of-the-mill dealers at the moment, it's a bit hit and miss, to be honest. Some are very good, others are less so. So yeah, I think the best advice is do some research before you pull the trigger on buying a car. Make sure you know what you're looking for. Yeah, Zoes can be a tricky one because yeah, there's a lot of Zoes out there that only have the 22 kilowatt charger, which if you didn't realize that when you bought it, then yeah, that can limit how useful the car might be for longer journeys. But yeah, there are ways around it. Happy to take input from anyone else.
Yeah, I'll pass to Derek and then Kathy after.
Actually, only recently a Dublin dealership reached out to me, and I went in after hours, socially distanced with their sales team, and spent 90 minutes going through the EV sales journey. So it was great to see a dealership future-proofing their sales team. But I know that Raj is on the call as well from Affinity EV, and within his software that is specifically targeted dealers, there's an education piece in there as well as to what different cars can or cannot do, and upskilling that. I remember at the first AGM that I attended, Simon, I think there was a flyer or a trifold leaflet that the Irish EV Owners Association were printing out, or a poster that they were handing into dealers. Maybe it's something that we could look at moving forward if we want to build up those relationships with the local dealers as well. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was something that one committee member did take on at one stage. This is going back a couple of years now, and then that person had to leave, so no one's picked it up. But yeah, for sure, it's something we can look at again in the next year.
Kathy, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, so I made a suggestion, I think it might have been to Kevin last year about, you know, could you set up some sort of a buddy system, because I have a confession to make. I bought a Leaf from a non-EV garage. I didn't get a manual. I'm not very good at going on the internet to find out how to do things. So basically, I come home, I charge the car, and when it's finished, it's finished. But I don't know how to do any of the, you know, the timing things or anything like that. And I just wonder, you know, if there was some sort of a buddy system, obviously, you know, social distant or even online, just somebody just to kind of talk through, if people were, you know, willing to kind of get involved in something like that, it might be a way to help out people who, you know, are not technically minded. But and I know you mentioned about, you know, do your research before you buy, but I wanted to buy an EV. I knew that that was for me, but you know, I just didn't get any support at all from where I bought it from. And I suppose hindsight is a great thing, and I realized I should have, you know, sought better kind of guidance. So that was just a suggestion of some sort of a buddy system if people wanted to opt into that.
I think it's a nice idea, and I think it is something that we've maybe talked about before, but maybe it's just kind of fallen through the cracks. I mean, I think there'll be any number of people who are members of Ievoa who would be, you know, happy to have a chat or a call.
I know
about these sort of things. So yeah,
Colin did a great thing a few weeks ago around charging and public chargers and that, but I'm even dumber than that.
Yeah, talk to Colin. Colin's very knowledgeable about all these things. He'll give you all the information you need. Colin can be everyone's buddy.
Thanks.
Okay, how are we doing, Kevin or Thomas?
Another thing is
I'm just formatting the results.
Okay, great. Okay, time for one more quick one then.
Simon, I've added a couple of slides for the results, and just to follow up on the previous question, there is also the YouTube channel that is now with our name, and there's plenty of resources in there. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff. It's very amateur, as you know, but I think there's a lot of interesting information for anyone getting into the EV space.
Yeah. So anyone who didn't pick it up, so EV TV has become what, as of today, Guillaume, Ievoa TV? Or what is, or is
just,
it just
the Irish EV Owners Association YouTube channel?
Okay. Okay, great.
So yeah, we have a weekly video usually on the weekends. There's a video coming out, and we've done videos about pretty much anything. Some educational, some about vehicles, anything really. Charge points, owners, experiences, etc. Road trips, you name it. So yeah, we try to keep putting content there every week.
I guess this is one of the things we can maybe talk about again, Guillaume, is how do we get to people before they make their buying decision so that they know we're there and they can benefit of the advice before they pull the trigger on buying something. So maybe it's around that Facebook advertising piece again or something like that. So it's something we can think about. Okay.
Yep, good to go.
Especially if we're going to tens of thousands of new owners in a year rather than 5,000 or 6,000.
Now I'm going to have to reload this presentation, am I? Hey, Thomas, do you want to take it from there and I'll go through the slides? Yeah.
Okay, as regards the voting on the changes to the Constitution, we had 37 members vote, 36 were in favour of the changes and 1 was not. So the changes have been passed.
Fantastic.
This is just a breakdown of the 34 people who voted for the election of committee members this year. Okay, so if I read the results right, then we have Simon Acton as chairperson, Kevin Dowling for public relations, Michael Sherlock for treasurer, Thomas McGuire for secretary, Paul Kelly for IT, and for committee members without portfolio, we have Gilon Segman, Bart Connelly, Peter Bracken, Eamon Stack, Derek Riley, and Roland Crinan. So thanks to everyone who voted and congratulations to those who got elected. And we'll be in contact with, I believe, some of the others about other subcommittees.
Yeah, so it's a shame we only have 11 seats, and unfortunately, yeah, so we obviously, anyone that didn't get elected on this occasion, we'd be delighted to include you in one of the subcommittees moving forward. And, there's more work to do than 11 people can do. So we'll definitely be in touch with everyone to see how we can fit everyone in. And of course, being a voluntary organization, people's priorities change and things change. So there's generally opportunities within the year for co-opting committee members for one reason or other. Certainly has happened in every year that I've been involved. So yeah, hang in there and we'll definitely keep everyone involved. But thank you very much for compiling the results, guys. And it's great to be elected as chairman for another year. Thank you. Let's move on. Have we received, guys, any motions, or are there any motions from the floor at this stage? Because we didn't receive any by email, or we didn't receive any that weren't discussed and discarded. So yeah, let's just have a quick check. If you've got a motion or something to discuss as a motion, then raise your hand now. Anyone seeing any hands? I can't see everybody because I'm sharing the screen.
Yeah, no hand raised.
No hands raised. Okay, we'll move on then. So no official motions this year. Thank you. And then any other business. So if anyone feels the need to keep this going longer, and I do apologise for overrunning. Unfortunately, we like to give everyone an opportunity to talk and as much opportunity for people to ask questions. So if there's any other business, then raise your hand now and we'll cover that off. Do you see any, Kevin? Okay. Well, that's it then for another year. Thank you everyone for attending on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Hopefully next year we'll be back to a physical event, but we will also keep the virtual option going as well. I think it's very useful for people who aren't in the location where we have the physical events. So yeah, let's leave it there. There will be a recording of this event, which we'll publish just as soon as we can pull it together, probably by next weekend. But yeah, thank you very much for your time today, and take care out there. Thank you.